Numbers, chapter 35. And Yahweh speaks to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan, near Jericho, saying, Command the sons of Israel, and they have given to the Levites cities to inhabit, from the inheritance of their possession. You also give the outskirt around them of the cities to the Levites. And the cities have been for them to inhabit, and their outskirts are for their livestock, and for their goods, and for all their beasts. And the outskirts of the cities which you give to the Levites are, from the wall of the city and outside, 1,000 cubits around. And you have measured from the outside of the city, the east quarter 2,000 by the cubit, and the south quarter 2,000 by the cubit, and the west quarter 2,000 by the cubit, and the north quarter 2,000 by the cubit. And the city is in the midst. This is the outskirts of the cities to them. And the cities which you give to the Levites are the 6 cities of refuge, which you have given for the fleeing there of the manslayer. And besides them you give 42 cities. All the cities which you give to the Levites are 48 cities, them and their outskirts. And the cities which you give are from the possession of the sons of Israel. From the many you multiply, and from the few you diminish. Each, according to his inheritance which they inherit, gives to the Levites from his cities. And Yahweh speaks to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and you have said to them, when you are passing over the Jordan to the land of Canaan, and have prepared cities for yourselves, they are cities of refuge to you. Then a manslayer, striking a person through ignorance, has fled there, and the cities have been for a refuge to you from the Redeemer. And the manslayer does not die until his standing before the congregation for judgment. As for the cities which you give, 6 are cities of refuge to you. 3 of the cities you give from beyond the Jordan, and 3 of the cities you give in the land of Canaan. They are cities of refuge. For sons of Israel, and for a sojourner, and for a settler in their midst, are these 6 cities for a refuge, for the fleeing there of anyone striking a person through ignorance. And if he has struck him with an instrument of iron, and he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer is certainly put to death. And if he has struck him with a stone in the hand, with which he could die, and he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer is certainly put to death. Or if he has struck him with a wooden instrument in the hand, with which he could die, and he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer is certainly put to death. The Redeemer of blood puts the murderer to death himself. In his coming against him, he puts him to death. And if he pushes him in hatred, or has cast anything at him by lying in wait, and he dies, or he has struck him with his hand in enmity, and he dies, the striker is certainly put to death. He is a murderer. The Redeemer of blood puts the murderer to death in his coming against him. And if, in an instant, without enmity, he has pushed him, or has cast any instrument at him without lying in wait, or with any stone with which he could die without seeing, indeed causes it to fall on him, and he dies, and he is not his enemy, nor seeking his evil, then the congregation has judged between the striker and the Redeemer of blood by these judgments. And the congregation has delivered the manslayer out of the hand of the Redeemer of blood, and the congregation has caused him to return to the city of his refuge, to where he has fled, and he has dwelt in it until the death of the chief priest, who has been anointed with the holy oil. And if the manslayer indeed goes out from the border of the city of refuge to where he flees, and the Redeemer of blood has found him at the outside of the border of the city of refuge, and the Redeemer of blood has slain the manslayer, blood is not reckoned to him, for he dwells in the city of refuge until the death of the chief priest. And after the death of the chief priest, the manslayer turns back to the city of his possession. And these things have been for a statute of judgment to you throughout all your generations, in all your dwellings. Whoever strikes a person, by the mouth of witnesses, one slays the murderer, and one witness does not testify against a person to cause him to die. And you take no atonement for the life of a murderer who is condemned to die, for he is certainly put to death. And you take no atonement for him who had to flee to the city of his refuge, to return to dwell in the land, until the death of the priest. And you do not profane the land which you are in, for blood profanes the land. As for the land, it is not pardoned for blood which is shed in it, except by the blood of him who sheds it. And you do not defile the land in which you are dwelling, in the midst of which I dwell. For I, Yahweh, dwell in the midst of the sons of Israel.